This is the Physical Activity Researcher Podcast, a podcast for researchers of sedentary behavior, physical activity, and sports. Join for a relaxed dialogue about research design, practicalities, and, well, anything related to research. Learn from your fellow researchers useful and relevant information that does not fit into formal content and limited space of scientific publications. And here is your host, researcher and entrepreneur, Olli Tikkanen.
Welcome everyone. In this episode, we are talking about active working and office ergonomics. I'm honored to have the guest of today's episode. He has done his Ph.D. in functional anatomy and biomechanics, master's in ergonomics, and bachelor degree in psychology. He describes himself as researcher, consultant, and teacher in Human Factors and Ergonomics. Currently, he is working as a director of his company, Knowledge Sharing Events. He has also qualified recently as a fitness instructor and personal trainer. He has published over 80 official reports and 70 papers in peer-reviewed journals. He has also published 12 books, and his newest book being A Guide to Active Working in the Modern Office. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest, Dr. Robert Bridger. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here. So, how should we promote the active working? How can we get the things to be better?
How should we promote it? Well, of course, I think everyone should buy every member of their staff in their offices a copy of my book to take home with them. Sorry, I'm only kidding. No, I think that we need to promote it by giving, as I've tried to do in the book, by giving useful advice that's backed up by science, that has a proper rationale and is usable in everyday life, in everyday working life. And I think we have a real opportunity to do this now with more people working from home, as I'm sure they are up in Norway and in other countries, in Finland and elsewhere. But down in the UK, there's still lots of people working from home. And what we found is that many businesses and large corporations are in no hurry to have all of their staff coming back to the office. Why not? Because they found that actually you can trust people to work from home. I think it's been quite an eye-opener for many managers, and I'm speaking this as an ex-manager myself. I used to manage a department, a human factors department, so I know how managers think. They think if everyone's going to work from home, they're just going to spend all day drinking tea and not doing any work. If anything, the opposite applies. When they come into the office, they spend all day drinking tea with their colleagues. When you leave them at home on their own, they get on with their work. I'm being a bit facetious there, but anyway. So I think we have a great opportunity here to give people useful advice about working from home and being more active at work. And it's a great opportunity. Working from home is a great opportunity to be more active at work during your working day. And I'll tell you why. I don't know what the situation is in Scandinavia, but I do know that in the UK, the average daily commute is probably about 45 minutes to an hour each way. So people are not just spending probably 6, 7, 8 hours a day sitting in the office. They're spending a couple of hours a day sitting in their cars or sitting on trains. So if they work from home, they're already ahead of the game, because they've reduced their daily sitting time, or they have the potential to reduce their daily sitting time if they use that time wisely. And the way to do that most wisely is to spread your work out over a longer period of time. And so to move away from these long periods of sitting for hours on end, just working at your computer, use that time where you're not sitting commuting, and spread that out through the day to do work in a standing posture and to do other things maybe throughout the day.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I actually read, I think it was a study done in UK that longer your commute is, less exercise you will do and lower quality of life you will have. So it really showed that you shouldn't have a long commute. You should try to live close to where you work. But I'm always been surprised that in UK people are commuting long distances. Why do you think it is like that?
I think there are a number of reasons why people commute. It's partly historical. Another reason, of course, is property prices. If you have, when you look at the where a lot of the economic activity is, or the better paid jobs, they're often in big cities like London, where property is expensive, and a lot of people cannot afford to live close to where they work in the UK. I think that's one of the reasons.
Yeah, yeah. And actually in for working from home, I think in Finland they were doing already some studies on corporate wellness, and they found that employees are having a better well-being working from home. So I think it will be really interesting. Are people actually going back to the office anymore in the same way? Because for employer, if your people are actually doing the work and they are having a better well-being, it will be interesting to see how it goes in the after COVID.
Yes, I did some research on mental well-being in office workers a few years ago, and we found some interesting findings. One of them, now most of these office workers didn't have a long commute because this was outside London. Most of them commuted for around 20 minutes, and that didn't worry them at all. That wasn't a cause of stress or dissatisfaction or anxiety. In fact, many of them seem to think that 20 minutes was that short commute of about 20 minutes was quite positive, because that was a time when they were on their own and they were free to they had private time and there was no one to talk to them, and they had some time on their own and they could think their own thoughts and let their minds wander. But one of the things we did find that was very strongly associated with poor mental well-being, with depression and anxiety, was a lack of work-life balance. So I think if working from home can improve work-life balance, then that's another advantage, a mental benefit, good for their mental well-being as well as their physical well-being. Although one does have to be careful with that as well, because that's okay. But for some people, I'm thinking now, for example, of a young person living in a one-bedroomed flat in a part of the town that's not very pleasant or interesting. Working from home could be a bit of a nightmare, and that individual could become socially isolated. So I think that, as with most of these issues, each thing has to be thought about and weighed up, considered on its merits, and it has to be solutions have to be based on scientific evidence, and they also have to be based on individual circumstances as well.
Yeah, and how do you see the role of measurements and activity trackers when we are promoting active working?
I think they're potentially very useful, and I'll explain why. And that is that it's very difficult to modify your own behavior if you're not aware of it. And most of the time, people don't go to work in an office to be active or to sit properly or anything like that. They go to work to do a job, to earn money. So the kinds of actimeters and physical activity monitoring, for example, is potentially very interesting and a useful tool to give people feedback, so that when they do try to change their behavior, they get feedback about the effects or the benefits of the changes that have been made, and they're therefore able to modify their behavior accordingly. It's a similar. So in other words, I would see it from the health point of view as being as important as having maybe a set of weighing scales in your bedroom or your bathroom, so you can weigh yourself.
Yeah, I agree, and You said about standing desks that there's some misconceptions. Do you see any other misconceptions or common mistakes about active working?
I think so, yes. I think there are a few points to make. One of them is that active working doesn't, if you're an employer, a large corporation, if you're a facilities manager and you want to encourage active working amongst your employees, you don't need to invest in sit-stand desks, because that's just one possible solution. And I can tell you it's interesting historically. In the 1980s, Dr. A.C. Mandel came up with an alternative for office desks based on a very high desk with a forward sloping seat. And I think one of the reasons it didn't catch on as well as it deserved to have caught on was because employers would have had to invest in new desks as well as new chairs, rather than just buying ergonomic chairs. So sit-stand desks or standing desks are not the only way of promoting active office work, and probably not the best way for some kinds of workers. I mean, I've seen in research, which I've quoted in my book, on things like, pedal desks, where you have those little pedals underneath the desk and you can cycle away while you're sitting, working at your computer. There are things I've seen called foot fidget devices, which is a sort of an elasticated footrest you could put onto your desk and you could bounce your feet up and down on it all day long. So yeah, there are alternatives, and also look at the way offices are run. I think one a good idea would be to encourage people to make more use of the stairs. In physiological terms, walking up the stairs is about 3 or 4 mets, which is compared to standing working at a computer is far more physically active. Probably a better bet for most people. Just give up using the lifts, and you'll immediately get benefits of from being more active at work. So where people are going wrong, I think, is one way you can go wrong is to assume or to equate active office work with standing desks. Standing desks are just one way of helping people to be more active.
And you have done a long career in office ergonomics. You have done a lot of research. Could you tell about the most interesting studies you have done?
The most interesting studies that I've done in office ergonomics, I think probably one of the most interesting studies that I've done, which surprised me. It wasn't done by me, it was done by my Ph.D. student, Rosemary Foster. And this was the study where we looked in the 1990s at people doing mentally demanding work while standing at the computer. Because we weren't expecting the result that we got. And as I mentioned, the result was that when people do mentally demanding work standing at a computer, they stand as still as they can possibly stand without realizing it and become very uncomfortable. So we were a bit surprised by the result. But at the time, we didn't understand its significance because only a very few people were standing to work at computers in those days. There were hotel receptionists and other people like that. So it was quite a pleasing piece of research to have been done, and I'm very pleased that we did it because it's very relevant to the problems of today.
Yeah, I agree. It's an interesting finding. I think very very interesting things you have brought up about the book. If listeners are interested getting the book, where they can find the book?
Well, one place, of course, is to go to the CRC Press website. If you just go to CRC Press on Google that in, and you'll get to there, and then just type in A Guide to Active Working in the Modern Office, Homo Sedens in the 21st Century. That's one way of getting it. Even easier is just go on to Amazon and type in A Guide to Active Working in the Modern Office, or just my name, R.S. Bridger, and you can get it there. And for further information about me and what I do, you can always visit my website, which is just www.rsbridger.com. And then you can find details for all my books and publications there. And if there are any papers that you want to read, you can just contact me through the website and obtain them. In terms of any other research, and this would suit academics and researchers, if you want to access any of my old papers on sitting and standing at work, have a look at my page on ResearchGate, and there's a lot of resources on there too.
Yeah, thanks for those resources. I also saw from your webpage that you have written quite many other books. Would you like to tell a little bit about your other books?
Yes. Well, my main other book that I've written is my textbook, and that is a book called Introduction to Human Factors and Ergonomics. That's published by CRC Press, and that's now in its 4th edition. I wrote the first edition in 1995, and the 4th edition came out a couple of years ago. And that's mainly used as a textbook by universities who want to, who have courses in human factors and ergonomics, or who have a course in something else and want to put on some modules in human factors and ergonomics. That book is also available from the publisher or from Amazon or any of the internet booksellers. But that book comes with an instructor's manual that is for lecturers and professors to help them prepare lectures and tutorials and demonstrations. It's also got answers to all of the questions in the book, because the textbook's got questions at the end of every chapter. There's also a guide to tutorials and seminars in the book, which is basically to help lecturers come up with discussion topics for seminars with their students. And there is also a package of 500 PowerPoint slides on human factors and ergonomics, which could be used to support as a basis for lectures. And for academics, universities that take the book as a course text, all the artwork is available electronically from the publisher. That book sells all over the world. It's in English and in Chinese.
Yeah,
we've got any Chinese listeners.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you said that it has like 500 PowerPoint slides that you can use.
Yeah, but you have to be an academic and adopt it as a course text, because the publishers don't give you something for nothing, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. And maybe related to that, you have been an academic researcher and you have moved more to consultant teacher work and writing books. How do you feel the process of writing books as an academic person?
Well, I have a view on that, in that people don't write books write them. In other words, the book already has to be inside you, so to speak. And so when you write it, it's just coming out. It might sound a bit strange, but that's the way I experience it. So when I first think about the book, it's like you can see it in the distance through a telescope, you know, that's around the wrong way, and you can see it and it's there. It's complete. It's just not very clear. So you have to just sit down and start writing. And as you start writing, you're just walking, it's like mentally walking closer and closer to it until it's done. And that's it.
Yeah, I like the idea, and I think I understand what you mean.
This podcast is sponsored by Fibion. Fibion is an accurate sitting and physical activity tracking device and analysis platform. It is a great tool for projects that aim for behavior change in sedentary behavior and incidental physical activity. Fibion provides easy-to-understand PDF and web browser reports for participants. Other features include comparisons to recommendations, linking results to health risks, achievement cards, and interactive goal-setting tool. In addition, Fibion provides an API that allows for easy integration to other systems and applications. Learn more about Fibion at fibion.com/research. Fibion, from researchers to researchers.
And what would be your tips for academics who are thinking of writing maybe a little bit more popular book than a academic book?
Think of the title.
So that's the only tip you give. Think about the title. Yeah.
Once you've got the title, you'll have the book. If it's there, you'll have it, and you'll just write it.
Yeah, I like it.
Oh, I do have one other tip for academics who want to write popular books. Always distinguish between writing a book and publishing a book. They're not the same. I have never written a book in order to publish it. I've written a book to write it. And then I've been fortunate in that it's been published. But if people come to me and say, I want to publish a book on that, and I would say to them, well, have you written it? No. Okay, well, go and write the book.
So is your advice that you should really write it even before when you contact the publisher, that you have it ready and then you would approach the publisher?
Well, when I wrote the first edition of my textbook, I wrote the whole book. And then I sent it to the publisher and they were amazed because most people don't do that. But I think it is worthwhile to talk to a publisher, academic publisher, first about your ideas, because they will, they'll soon tell you whether they're interested or not.
Yeah, no, I like your ideas, and I think they are a little bit different than many people would say. Maybe others would say that you go first to the publisher and kind of negotiate what kind of book they would need. So I like kind of fresh ideas from your side, and you have the experience. You have written more than 10 books.
Well, it's always good to talk to a publisher. It just my only view is when do you want to talk to the publisher? I think it is useful. I mean, it's certainly, but I just have this view that if you really want to write a book, just go ahead and write it because you want to write the book. And that's one, I suppose one advantage of my approach is that if you just write it yourself, you are absolutely free to write it in exactly the way you want to. Whereas if you get engaged with the publisher very early on, and the publisher is interested, the publisher will send your ideas out to potential users and they will come back with comments, and immediately you are no longer free.
Yeah, I see your point. And you describe on your website yourself as a researcher, consultant, and teacher in human factors and ergonomics. What are you most at the time, and how do you share your time? And if people want to collaborate with you in some form, what kind of collaborations you are interested in?
Well, I'm open to all ideas. I'm open to doing part-time lecturing or teaching. I'm open to consultancy. I'm doing some consultancy work at the moment, but that's in a different area. One of my main areas of consulting is in human factors and safety, which is helping organizations to investigate safety occurrences, particularly accidents. And I'm working in healthcare at the moment on incidences where things have gone wrong in the treatment of patients, put it that way. And I'm part of an official investigation. And my job is to provide the safety investigators with human factors support and guidance. So I'm very much open to that kind of work in terms of consultancy. I'm also open to consulting on office ergonomics. Very, very open to doing short talks and seminars for companies on active office work. We did one a while back in London before the lockdown, so there isn't much public speaking going on at the moment. I don't think anywhere. I think many of us who are involved in putting on events have found ourselves, excuse the pun, but our business has been overtaken by events in the form of COVID-19. But I'd be interested to talk to some universities as well about how well I could support them with any of their coursework or training courses or research that they want to do. If they need assistance writing grant applications, that sort of thing, I can do that. Another area where I've been talking to a company is in the area of research ethics, because when I worked for the Navy, I was a member of the Royal Navy Scientific Advisory Committee, which did scientific and ethical scrutiny of research protocols. And this was in all areas, from biomechanics right through to psychology. And I'm on standby to help a company that's going to submit a protocol to an ethics committee in the defence domain in the UK. And my job is to be their is to be their ethics friend. In other words, to help them to negotiate the research ethics and the protocol scrutiny process that they're going to have to go through. And basically to hold their hand and help them through it. Because I've written very many research protocols myself. I've been through that process. I've also acted as and it's adversarial review process as well, of over 500 protocols I've submitted to for ethical scrutiny. So I know that game quite well. And so basically I have quite a varied portfolio in consulting, teaching, and research. I'm not undertaking any research at the moment, but I'd be very interested in doing so if it's something that if they thought that I could be helpful and provide support. Also helpful, available to assist with writing papers or grant applications, particularly if you need an English speaker to help.
Yeah, so a lot of different collaboration possibilities. So it has been really interesting discussions. I think it was very good points and kind of fresh ideas from the studies from the 80s. But anyway,
fresh ideas from an old man, yeah.
Yeah, fresh ideas based on 80s studies done in 80s. But what would be your final remarks for this very interesting episode?
My final remarks for the I think my final remarks would be that when we're looking at active office work, my final remarks would be the age of hyper-sedentary office work is dead. And we need to move on and being active when we're working, when we're doing office. I'll start again. The age of hyper-sedentary office work is a relic of the 20th century, and it's time to move on, and active office work is the way forward.
I like it. It's very good. So thank you for this episode. What are the plans for the rest of the day for you?
Well, I'm going to be true to form. I've got to practice what I preach. So I'm going to have a cup of tea, and then I'm going to cycle down to the tennis club and have 45 minutes in the gym working out. And then when I get home, I might have a beer.
Sounds good. Sounds how it should be. It was a pleasure. So thank you, Robert, for taking the time.
Thanks, Ollie. Pleasure talking to you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening. And feel free to contact me through my website if you wish to do so. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us this week on Physical Activity Researcher Podcast. If you like the show, make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing or following the show on Twitter. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. If you found value in the show, we would really appreciate a rating on Apple Podcast or whichever app you're using. Or if you would, in a real old school way, simply tell a friend about the show. It would be a great help for us. We have a fantastic lineup of guests for forthcoming episodes, so be sure to tune in. Thank you all for your support and have a great day.